Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look at the ins and outs of marketing through an agile lens. You'll learn from interviews with top agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing with John Cass. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Andrew Burrows, Agile Marketing Leader at IBM, based in New York. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. In preparing for this call, we talked a little bit about your journey to using Agile Marketing. I think we should start with that. How did you start with Agile Marketing at IBM?
Well, my tale has a lot of tragedy, which is probably a great way to start. I work at IBM now. Before IBM, I actually made video games. So I worked at a number of different places in the UK, then one place in the US. When I worked in the UK, I worked for companies like Traveler's Tales, Warthog. We tended to make a lot of movie license games like Lego Star Wars, Transformers, Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that kind of thing. And our whole vibe was that, whatever would happen, this game is coming out when the movie comes out in the theater, right? Or cinema, as you and I would say. Because if your movie's coming out on September 25th, then your video game comes out on October 1st, you've lost a huge amount of revenue. Right? So you always needed to get it on the shelf before the movie hit the shelves. And this was done in an incredibly unagile way. It was complete brute force. Teams ranging from, anywhere from, say, 40 people to 80 people at a time, working incredibly long hours and working incredibly hard to get it done. And I'm fond of that time. It was fun, and you build an incredible camaraderie with the people you work with, and the sense of accomplishment is massive, but it's not a very sustainable way of living, right? It worked when I was a young man. So in 2007, I wanted to try to do something a little different. And there was a company in New York called Large Animal Games. They took a punt on me to bring me over and have me work for them. And they said two questions. They said, one, we're going to make games for this new thing. It's called Facebook. Have you ever played Facebook games? There's a game called, I think, Mafia Wars on MySpace. And I was like, sure. And then I'm immediately going on MySpace because I didn't even have a social media account at the time. Then the other thing they said was, we're going to do this thing called Scrum. You know about that, right? It's a form of project management. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I read Scrum and XP from the Trenches by Henrik Nyberg on the flight from Manchester, England to New York. So when I landed, little did I know at the time that I was heading into an incredibly bountiful part of my career that focused on data, real-time data analysis, learning loops, true agility, all of those different aspects coming together in this perfect storm of what you need to learn and embrace over the next 20, 30 years. But when I landed, I thought, okay, well, let me do Scrum. And I did Scrum. I did Scrum very well by the book. And, after about 9 months of it not working, I had to go back and really try to analyze what the problem was. And when I say not working, I'm talking about people, me dragging people to meetings, me not understanding why people can't find their groove, things just not clicking, software not getting done well, our games being buggy, we're not releasing, like all those myriad things. And as I began to unpack sort of all the reasons why, I began to realize that I was the single root cause of every single problem that we had, right? Either in my behavior, my approach, my thinking. I was approaching it like a project manager, and Scrum can sort of fake that, at least for a little bit on the surface, right? So, and again, I can be open and humble on these. I remember going into a meeting with my team once, and thinking to myself, I remember being so frustrated because I felt I had to come up with the solutions to all the problems, and if I didn't come up with a solution, nothing was going to happen. And I can remember going into this meeting and thinking to myself, you know what? I'm really frustrated. I'm just not going to say anything. I'm just going to let this meeting kind of peter out, and maybe we'll draw a line under this and we'll move forward from there. And I sat in the meeting and I didn't say anything, and there was some uncomfortable silence, and then people started talking. And I can remember thinking to myself, wow, like when I don't say anything, they say really good things, right? Which is horrifying, like a really horrifying thing to kind of acknowledge about yourself. But it really pointed to the fact that the behaviors, right, that had made me successful in my career to that point weren't going to make me successful anymore. And I had to really kind of evaluate and understand how to improve. One of the earliest things I did around that was, if you're familiar with I think it's pronounced DISC, right? The DISC test, the DISC.
Yes.
Where you answer these behavioral questions, and it kind of says, how you fit on this graph. So I think the metaphor is, if you're a high D, let's say you're a general and you're in charge of 5,000 troops and you have to take a hill. A high D is going to look at the hill and say, I'm going to take that hill no matter what, right? Everybody with me, charge. A high I is going to say, who do I need to ally with or partner with who can take this hill, or maybe I can convince someone to take that hill for me. And a high S would say, these aren't just 5,000 soldiers, these are 5,000 people with families and children. Like, this is a reckless waste of life. Why are we doing this? And then a high C would say, why do I have 5,000 troops? Why don't I have 4,900, right? All those sort of different identifications of personality. And my D was off the charts high. My I was off the charts low. And my S was, I think, 33% S, 33% C. It was like the perfect, actually, developer profile in DISC. And what was good about that was, as I was reading it and kind of recognizing those behaviors, I started to be able to realize that how I show up, I can change. I can change my own behavior. I can change my own approach. I can change my own way of doing work. And then I started to really try to adapt what we were doing, right, in terms of helping the organization and helping the teams at the time through agility. And I think that for me is the moment when I stopped doing Agile and started being Agile. And I think for me that was probably in fall 2008 that I finally started to really understand the difference. So around the same time, I was starting to attend a lot of meetup groups in New York, and I was talking and presenting at some meetup groups. And through that network, the opportunity at IBM came up, and I'd never really considered a career move like that. I made video games, and every company I'd ever been at was a startup. And here it is. Here's an organization of 400,000 people. The marketing organization is 5,000 people, and they want to do Agile in the enterprise, and they want to do it in an organization that I had no familiarity and knowledge of whatsoever. And that was just such a terrifying prospect that I thought, how can I not do this? And it's been incredible. The past few years at IBM have honestly been the best in my career. And here I am today.
So you talked a little bit about some of the milestones that you've gone through. How have those experiences impacted on the use of Agile for teams?
I think a lot of my past experience and the past experience of the colleagues I have on my team at IBM have really shaped the way that we the way that we approach our work, it really shaped the kind of design principles, if you like, that underpin our work. There's only one IBM, and there's only one IBM marketing organization. And, my team and I are responsible for helping this global team adopt agility in an effective and positive way. So that's a huge responsibility. And the last thing that I would ever want to do with that is to do something that put people in a place, or had people feeling the way that people felt in those first few months when I was trying to do this myself. So we have a number of sort of design principles behind our transformation that draw on all the different experiences that myself and everyone on the team have had. How we're people first, not framework first. How you're an agile organization when people behave in an agile way, not when they are obedient enough to attend your meetings. You're an agile organization when you can see and hear certain behaviors. And none of this is, as again, to anyone listening on this call, none of this is this rocket science, right? The Agile Manifesto from 2001 details 12 principles that to this day still, in my opinion, last as here are the 12 behaviors of agile people, right? Regardless of your industry or the size of your organization or anything like that. So our whole approach transformation is, how do we help everybody in marketing work in a way that embodies those principles? And the other thing I like to sort of orient the team around is there's a nobility in this work. We've always said in our industry for a long time, right, that agile teams are happier and more productive. Right? Agile organizations are happier and more productive. And I like to think that if we're able to help IBM Marketing become a more agile organization, well, not only will we make people more productive and more engaged at work, but maybe they'll be in a good frame of mind when they go home, right? And they'll have a moment or two where they're more present with their significant others or their loved ones. And maybe they won't be stressed out as much about things at night, and they can actually just enjoy their time and have that presence with their families. So there's really, I think, a lot of the human element of what we do. We really want that to come through to the fore.
So you talked a little bit about how it's about people rather than framework. So could you sort of highlight how your part of the organization helps support the team members in deploying agile marketing across the enterprise? What's the function? What are the capabilities for deploying agile marketing across the enterprise?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's actually take a few steps back from that for a second. So when we started on this work, one of the first things that we tried to do was we tried to draw on the wall how marketing worked. Right? How does something go from a decision that something needs to be marketed all the way through to it appearing on somebody's screen in Portugal, right? Like what is the entire flow there? What are all the different systems and processes and teams and parts of the organization that touch on that? And it's kind of incredible how the machine of marketing, right? All these different cogs, all these different systems actually operates together. And that makes you realize, first off, that one, there's no off-the-shelf way to do agile marketing. You're never going to have a team that is building and iterating on a market campaign, right, acting and behaving in the same way as, let's say, the team of data scientists and data analysts who are pulling the raw data in and parsing it through each of the internal systems and exposing that through dashboards, right? They're all going to work in very different ways. Similarly, we have We have centralized groups that do, say, video services, or we have centralized groups that are actually shooting the videos that are used in commercials or on brand or whatnot. So the variety of work within this system is huge. So our sort of approach to this would be to say, we don't know the best way to do agile marketing, and we're not going to scale what we don't know. What we're going to do is, we know what an agile individual looks like, and what our ultimate aim is to empower the organization to be agile. And that I do believe that IBM marketing will figure out at some point the current best way to do agile marketing. But I'm sure someone will supersede 5 minutes later, but I think we will at some point figure that out. But as much as I would like that to be me, I don't think that's going to be me. I think it's going to be one of our marketers on the ground, or a team that we've established somewhere, or a team in one of the geos, or someone who's understands the different processes and framework elements and habits and tools and rituals that they can put into play, are building their structure and approach with a broader understanding of the system they fit in order to maximize the value they create, drive best value, do it in a really positive way, and be proud within an organization. So for us, it's really about how are we building out an organization that is truly embracing of change, is truly experimentative, truly empowering its marketers to figure out what works for them, is giving them the support and guidance to make, experiment, and fail, right, with different processes and do it better. And then how are we sharing that learning out across the rest of the organization so everyone can grow and learn together? And we're a long way from that utopian vision, but I'm happy with the progress we've made so far.
So you've mentioned that it's been an evolving process. How has the agile function in your organization developed over time? Specifically, have there been any lessons on large company organizational development of agile marketing at IBM that you think you can share to the rest of the industry?
Okay, so there are many different approaches to scaling agility across the enterprise, right? I remember talking to a friend from a large bank who I think had hired, I was teasing him because every time I went on LinkedIn, I was getting a job offer to come and work at his bank, because the sheer breadth of, they were basically just trying to hire anyone with agile in their title, right, on LinkedIn. They went en masse. How do we bring in people externally and help them kind of scale a framework approach across the entire organization? I went the other way, and we went very small. So in much in the spirit of, we don't really know what's going to work and what isn't, or even, again, where our attempts to drive an agile marketing organization will lead us. I formed a small team of, at the time, Scrum Masters from within other parts of IBM, people that I'd worked with in the past, and basically set us up as a small team against a really big goal, which was transform this entire organization. And I can remember those early conversations, massive skepticism from the people who we brought over, right? How can you go from being the Scrum Master for one team to now needing to kick off and sustain 25, 30 teams over the next few months, right? How do we even do that? Everything in my career up to now and the way that I've worked has told me that that's not possible. Anytime I personally have tried to manage more than one Scrum team, they've suffered. How are we going to scale and help this to progress?
You'd mentioned the use of change agents. I wondered if you could tell me more about that rollout in our previous discussions and how that's helped, how you deploy it across the enterprise.
So that's what led us to be able to scale. So we changed our approach to say, we need to be the ones who activate, educate, enable, and sustain. And we want to be dispensable but wanted. But if you like, we still, within the organization itself, we need what's our agile immune system, if you like? What are the white blood cells that we have for maintaining standards and continuous improvement? So in when we began in the first year, we scaled like a agile champions program across marketing, and that really put us in a place of having good quantity but low quality. Right? People it generated enthusiasm and advocacy, and we had a large number of people who signed up for that role. But the actual people through that role who were driving change wasn't as high a percentage as I would have liked. So from there, we went into a program that we called Amplify, where we bring through marketers 60 at a time and put them through a 3-day program, enabling them to go back into the organization as change agents. And we really try to use those 3 days to help people understand, the nuances of the values and the principles, right? The culture that you need to be able to establish and scale. So it's much more on the softer side of things than it is on the, here is how you do a stand-up, here is how you do a planning. It's kind of funny because in that course at the end of day one, a lot of them come to us and they say, when are we going to learn how to do this? And we say, talk to us tomorrow. And then they come back on day 2 and they go, when are you going to teach us how to actually do this? And we say, talk to us tomorrow. And then on day 3, they say, now I get it. And it's really about when you go back in the business, here is how you drive change that way. So we develop our own internal programs to scale the mindset, the culture, and the ability to change through our marketers. And then we have a very, very supportive leadership that really empowers people to own agility themselves.
So you've talked to, I think you've done a good job of explaining the philosophy of agile marketing at IBM. How are the different teams on their own using agile operationally? What technique do they use? Does it depend, as you described earlier, those different groups upon what type of organization it is, what type of division it is? How are they? What have you seen across each of those different departments?
Really wide variation, which actually makes me really happy. We have some teams that you could look at and they almost seem on the surface to be following a Scrum-like process, right? We have others who would be following some kind of almost, Kanban-like approach, right? Some that are more, maybe they've hired some people externally who understand how those work and they're a little more by the book. Others who've really created their own sort of approach, and maybe they do a stand-up every other day, and they develop their own alignment around that. I think in terms of, we give each team, we've created a repository, like a single source of truth for all the different things that you can apply, right? So different rituals that you can use, different meetings, like stand-ups and retrospectives and that kind of thing that you should be doing, and how you can do them, how you should think about them, right, to get value out of them. Like, there's no point just doing a stand-up every day. That's your coordination meeting for you guys to figure out what's actually not working and where do you go from here. So helping people understand the value of that, and then supporting teams as they experiment and try and find what works for them. The one mistake, or the one area that I think is really weak has been, I think I've always been a little, agile tooling has always been something that's sort of caused my eyebrows to go up, right? I still think the best agile tool ever created was, a shared spreadsheet like a Google Doc, right? Something that's just very transparent and very simple. But I know that everyone likes different tools, right? There are people that like Jira, people that like ZenHub, some people love Trello. In marketing, you've got people that love Rike. And then you also have to think about, when it comes to scaling a tool, how are we scaling people's ultimate career paths, right? If say the broader marketing industry is moving to one where the companies are really, looking for people that understand how to use Rike or how to use Monday, and we're not using those tools, what does that say to people internally, and what does it say to other people that we might be bringing in? So when we began this transformation, I kind of said, use the tool that works for you. We'll give you a suite of as many tools as possible, and we'll be pretty agnostic about what it is that you use, which is great in the instances where teams can come together and rally around something. But we're a big organization. We have many different cogs and different, internal systems that collaborate and coordinate with each other. And I would say that there are times where the lack of standardization around the practical tools used by the teams creates extra overhead that if I could go back in time, I would have thought much more clearly about mandating that. So that's one thing that right now I'm looking at and saying, I wish we could have been a bit more stringent around, here's a much smaller set that you should use, or if you're working in this kind of way, this is the approach that you should use.
So following up, what results have IBM teams achieved with Agile Marketing, and have you found differences depending on the approaches that they take?
That's a great question. It's been incredibly heartening. So we've seen improvements in our business metrics, first of all, which has just been, that's what you want to see, right? The value of the work that's coming out of marketing has increased. We're also seeing metrics in our overall employee engagement. So our employee engagement has risen across marketing since we began this journey. The third metric that we've seen a rise in is our own internal Agile health metric. So a lot of Agile health metrics out there today, I'm not a huge fan of, because for me, again, they seem to measure obedience. They seem to measure how closely you're following, a certain checklist of, things that should be done, velocity metrics that should be recorded, how many teams are doing stand-ups or retrospectives, that kind of thing. We wanted to actually have a metric that focused much more on the change. So, we know in an Agile organization, you have self-direction. And in a hierarchical organization like IBM, self-direction, it can often be a very delicate, difficult thing to get. So, and then you can't ask a question, right? Like, are you self-directed? That's not going to give you any kind of answer that's really usable. So we created a metric that asks questions that try to get to some of the root underpinning behaviors that we want to see. So, for example, we ask the question, if you need to make an important decision that could impact the project that you're on, right? Could alter its success. Can you make that decision? Because if you say no to that question, you're not self-directed. You're not empowered. You probably don't understand the rules of what you're currently engaging in. You probably don't fully have a clarity of purpose. If you say yes, then I think leadership has empowered you. You yourself have taken ownership of the responsibility of being agile. You're really thinking in an outcome-focused way. So we have those kinds of questions, and we ask people to grade them out of 10 and then give us those verbatim results. And we read every single one of those verbatims to try to figure out what kind of other engagement or enablement or communication strategy we need to build to help move the organization forward, or what impediments we need to surface to leadership. So since we started measuring the Agile health that way, across the entire organization, we've seen a 10.5% increase in the metrics coming back from that, which means, even for the question that I just gave you the example of, there's now 10.5% more people who are comfortable making that decision in the moment. So that makes me feel good.
That's great. That's great. So we talked a little bit about the idea of measuring the rate of change by marketers at IBM. What do you think IBM Agile marketers are adopting more quickly in terms of marketing strategies than other campaign marketer colleagues. Specifically, what's been the evolution of marketing for IBM on agile marketing strategies? Have you seen more use of customer journey mapping? Have you seen the use of agile for such techniques?
In our marketing organization, we have 11 disciplines that each person in marketing will fall into, right? You might be a product marketer, a campaign manager, you might be a content strategist, a digital strategist. So each of those disciplines then help you craft and grow the skills that you need in your career. And each of those have a different, as part of that discipline, you have a responsibility, right, and an ownership of the outcome. So what we've seen is by really helping people master their craft in terms of how you do your own individual job really well, and then putting you in a position on the team where you bring your skills to the table and everyone else brings their skills, and then you really align those to get the job done. You see a lot of the things that you've just mentioned, for example, happening more frequently, more organically, and more rapidly, which is then leading us to be more data-driven, more outcome-focused, more experimentative, and much more thoughtful in our approach, much greater co-creation, right, with, say, between what goes on in the US and then with the geos we have broadly. We have, Michelle Peluso, our CMO. And again, I've been very fortunate because our CMO gets Agile, right? She actually really understands it and is very much empowering her whole organization to go and do that. And I know not everyone in my position at other companies has that kind of support from above. But one of the things that she's really pushed for is the whole democratization of data across the organization. So there's nothing no one needs data-wise that they cannot get, or if there is, we're trying to surface that and solve that very quickly. So we're really trying to enable and empower teams to bring each of their crafts, each of their skills to bear on the team, unite to get things done, use the data that you have and be experimentative and find out what works, and really try to adopt that challenger mentality.
Well, Andrew, that's all we have time for today. Great discussion. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive into Agile Marketing with John Cass. My thanks for Andrew for doing a great job with the interview.
And if I can just say, since I started my own Agile journey way back in 2007, the community in New York and globally has just been fantastic, right? Everything from when the Yahoo mailing list was shooting off every second, all the way through to all the user groups and all the meetups and everything else. And I'd just like to extend a huge thank you to anyone that might be listening who at some point has helped me with my career, and hopefully I can return the favor someday to all of those.
Great sentiments, Andrew. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more, visit www.businessagility.institute.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.